Imagine it's the late 1700s. The brand new United States of America wants to trade with the world. But there's a huge problem, and it's not the British. It's pirates, not the swashbuckling, treasure hunting kind from movies, but the state-sponsored corsairs of the Barbary states. Algiers, Tunis, Tripoli, and Morocco. For centuries, these North African states had a simple business model: capture European and American merchant ships in the Mediterranean and hold the crews for a hefty ransom. If you didn't pay, your sailors could be enslaved for life. For years, European powers just paid up. It was easier and cheaper than fighting. And for a while, the young United States did too. Under Presidents Washington and Adams, America paid millions in tribute at one point. It was nearly a sixth of the entire federal budget. Think about that. A huge chunk of the nation's money was going straight to pirates, just to be left alone. It was humiliating, and many Americans were getting fed up. Enter President Thomas Jefferson. When he took office in 1801, he had a very different idea. Jefferson, a man of the Enlightenment, believed in free trade and hated the idea of paying tribute. He saw it as a pointless cycle of extortion that would never end. The Pasha of Tripoli, Yusuf Karamanli, decided to test this new president. He felt he was on getting his fair share of the American tribute money compared to the other Barbary states. Jefferson, however, was ready. Even before the Pacious Declaration, he had already dispatched a small squadron of American warships to the Mediterranean. He called it a squadron of observation, but its mission was clear: protect American shipping, by force if necessary. This was a huge step for the United States. It was the nation's first ever overseas naval deployment. The ships, including the famous frigates, like the USS President and USS Philadelphia, were the pride of the young American Navy. Their commander, Commodore Richard Dall, had orders to blockade Tripoli and confront any Barbary ships that dared to attack American interests. The war had officially begun. In one of the first major encounters, the schooner USS Enterprise, commanded by Lieutenant Andrew Sterrett, came across a 14-gun Tripolitan ship named the Trip. A fierce, 3-hour battle ensued. The Americans were better trained and more disciplined. They pummeled the Tripolitan vessel, which tried to fake surrender not once, but twice. After the third time, Sterrett's crew showed no mercy. They disarmed the ship completely, but, following their orders not to take prizes, they sent the battered vessel limping back to Tripoli as a warning. When its captain returned in disgrace, the furious Pasha had him paraded through the streets on a donkey as punishment. The United States had drawn first blood and sent a powerful message: America was here to fight. But the war was far from over, and disaster was just around the corner. In October 1803, the powerful frigate USS Philadelphia, under Captain William Bainbridge, was chasing a Tripolitan vessel when it ran aground on an uncharted reef in Tripoli's harbor. Stuck and helpless, the ship was quickly surrounded by enemy gunboats. Captain Bainbridge had no choice but to surrender. Over 300 American sailors were captured and thrown into Tripoli's dungeons, facing the very enslavement they were sent to prevent. To make matters worse, the Pasha's men managed to refloat the Philadelphia, one of America's best warships, and add it to their own fleet. It was a catastrophic blow to American morale and a massive strategic victory for Tripoli. News of the disaster reached the American squadron, and a young, daring lieutenant named Stephen Decatur, Jr. proposed a bold plan. He couldn't stand the thought of the USS Philadelphia being used against his countrymen. His idea was audacious, almost suicidal. Sneak into the heavily guarded harbor of Tripoli at night, board the captured frigate, burn it to the waterline, and escape. Commodore Edward Preble approved the mission. On the night of February 16, 1804, Decatur and a small team of volunteers sailed into Tripoli harbor, disguised in a captured Sicilian ketch. They renamed They drifted right up to the Philadelphia, telling the harbor guards they had lost their anchor in a storm. Once alongside, Decatur and his men swarmed aboard, swords drawn. They quickly overpowered the small Tripolitan crew, set fires throughout the ship, and scrambled back to the Intrepid just as the Philadelphia erupted in a massive fireball. As cannons from the shore, batteries roared to life. Decatur and his men sailed out of the harbor under the light of the burning frigate without losing a single man. When news of this raid reached Europe, The legendary British Admiral Horatio Nelson called it the most bold and daring act of the age. Stephen Decatur became an instant national hero. While the Navy was making headlines, the war's most legendary chapter was about to be written on land. William Eaton, the former American consul to Tunis, had an even crazier plan than Decatur's. He wanted to overthrow the Pasha of Tripoli and replace him with his exiled older brother, Hamid Karamanli, who was living in Egypt. Eaton believed that if Hamid was on the throne, he would be friendly to the U.S. with a tiny budget and Jefferson's lukewarm approval. Eaton traveled to Egypt, found Hamid, and assembled one of the most bizarre armies in history. It consisted of just 8 U.S. Marines, a handful of Greek mercenaries, and several hundred Arab and Turkish camel drivers. This ragtag force, led by Eaton and Murray, Lieutenant Presley Oban, set off on an epic 500-mile march across the brutal Libyan desert. They faced sandstorms, starvation, thirst, and constant mutinies among their hired soldiers who demanded more money. It was a logistical nightmare, but Eaton, with sheer force of will, pushed them onward. After a grueling 50-day march, they finally arrived at the city of Derna, Tripoli's second-largest city. On April 27, 1805, Eaton launched his attack. The American warships offshore bombarded the city's defenses while Eaton's land force charged the ramparts. Lieutenant O'Bannon and his small contingent of Marines led the assault, raising the American flag over the city's fortress. It was the first time the Stars and Stripes had ever been raised in victory on foreign soil in the Old World. The phrase from the Marines' hymn, "To the Shores of Tripoli," commemorates this very battle. The capture of Derna terrified the Pasha. With an American-backed army now on his doorstep and the U.S. Navy blockading his port, he finally realized that the United States was not going to back down. He feared Eaton and Hamid would march on the capital next. His will to fight was broken. In June 1805, the Pasha agreed to a peace treaty. They released 300 American prisoners from the Philadelphia for a ransom of $60,000, a huge sum, but far less than he had originally demanded. In return, the U.S. agreed to abandon its support for Hamid Karamanli and withdraw from Derna. William Eaton was furious, believing they were on the verge of total victory. But the treaty was signed. The war was over. So, what was the legacy of this strange and distant war? It was immense. The First Barbary War was, in many ways, America's coming-of-age party on the world stage. It established the United States as a nation that would defend its interests with military force rather than just pay tribute. It gave birth to American naval heroes like Decatur and O'Bannon, and created powerful new symbols for the young nation, like the U.S. Marine Corps Legendary March. While the U.S. would have to fight a second, shorter Barbary War a decade later to end the problem for good, the Tripolitan War proved that America was a power to be respected. It was a messy, difficult, and sometimes disastrous conflict, but it forged a new sense of national pride and a new direction for American foreign policy. Thank you so much for watching this deep dive into a fascinating and often overlooked part of American history. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, subscribe for more history content, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an update. Let me know in the comments what you think. We'll see you in the next one.